So this is mine.
Yeah, you can choose whichever.
Yeah, I like this. They drew a circle, shut me out, a heretic, a rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the will to win. We drew a circle and took them in. Please rise for the first hymn.
Now on land and sea descending brings the night its peace profound. Let our Vesper hymn be blending with the holy calm around. Jubilate, 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 amen. Jubilate, 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 amen. Soon as dies the sunset glory, stars of heaven shine out above, telling still the ancient story, their Creator's changeless love. Jubilate, 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 amen. Jubilate, 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 amen. Now our wants and burdens leaving, to the care that cares for all. Cease we fearing, cease we grieving, quietly our burdens fall. Jubilate, 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 amen. Jubilate, 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 amen. As the darkness deepens o'er us, our eternal stars arise. Hope and faith and love rise glorious, shining in the Spirit's sky. Jubilate, 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 amen. Jubilate, 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 amen.
Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I am so pleased to welcome you today. The things, just so you all know, middle hour is what we do sort of between the services. We have Sunday school for children and youth and adults. And this week for the adults, we have the continuing parenting support group for parenting in tumultuous times. I was waiting. Or PST for short. We also have, that's in room 5, PST. Room 6 is basically an introduction to our church if you want to learn more about Unitarian Universalism in this church. Even if you're already a member and know a lot about it, that's room 6. Room 7 is the social justice meeting. And then in here, between the services, the head of Invest Louisiana will be here. His name is Jan Moeller, to answer any questions that you may have just about the state of the economy in the state or in general. So just, kind of all of that is going on. And if you are a parent or someone who is caring for a child who is currently questioning their gender identity, at 1 o'clock today, there will be a class on that in the church. Online folks, we're glad you were with us. I don't have anything specific for y'all, but we're glad you're here. It's good to be together in church. Welcome.
Morning, Reverend Chris Long. Each week, when we gather, we take pause to breathe as a sacred community, held together by our values, our commitments to each other, and to dance into the joys and struggle of our lives. We do this through collective silence, meditation, or prayer. This morning's prayer. Spirit of life, universe, Gaia, God. In our time of prayer together, we take time to honor the Homa, Bayagula, and other indigenous communities whose lands we now inhabit. Friends, let's hold those within our community who are going through health issues for themselves or someone they love. Those here who are beset with the realities of addiction, know that we are here with you. Or if you're any of the number of folks who are facing ending of their work as they've known for years because of the chaos that is going on within our nation and our state, we know it is much too much. Yet for this time, and with those here, we can share what is happening with us and get the emotional support as we work to figure out what may come next. In this time when it feels like decisions are being made that impact our immigrants and citizens alike around the country, we can continue to connect locally with those who are rising up. And we say, not here, not on our watch. We can reach out to those who are most impacted by these decisions to let them know we are here. And if you have the resources for mutual aid to give of your time or your money, please do so. Even with all that is going on, let's remember that what we are doing is enough, and times are hard. Ever mindful of the famine conditions that are happening in Sudan, and yes, in Gaza, as the death toll still rise, may we be ever alert. Our ongoing prayers, may they be for peace and to end all wars and to speak into the hearts of those with the power to make that happen. Ashe. Shalom. Salam, blessed be. May it be so, and amen. The sharing of stones ritual here at the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge is a time in our service where we take pause. We take pause to come forth to share stones as we honor the joys and sorrows of our lives with this community. Visitors are always welcome to take part in this ritual. Those who gather are also invited to sign cards to members and friends of the congregation at our congregational care team table, which is out here in our reception area. Today we have one thinking of you card. We're sending healing thoughts and prayers to Lois Elisar. Those who would like to take part in this ritual, please come forth lining up on the east or west walls of the sanctuary, or if the center is easier for you, please take that. Online, please share your joys or sorrows in your stones in our chat box. Our sharing of stones ritual begins. let us say together our chalice lighting words. With hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
By 1820, of the 544 congregational churches in Massachusetts, 135 became Unitarian. Of the 25 oldest churches in the state, 20 became Unitarian. Only one of the Boston churches remained outside of the Unitarian fold. Perhaps more important to the future of the movement, the Unitarians were, for the most part, well-educated, financially well-off, theologically liberal, but politically and socially conservative. As a class, they dominated the Supreme Court in state government of Massachusetts. Being socially and politically conservative, the ministers had little interest in seeking converts. They were much more concerned with issues of moral character, civic virtue, public welfare, and philanthropy, then spreading Unitarianism to the masses. Indeed, many of them identified with Unitarianism more for the freedom it offered them because of specific doctrines. Thus, many of the older ministers, including Channing, remained reluctant to use the Unitarian label. Yes. Glad this is on YouTube. Given this state of mind, it is not surprising that denominational structures were slow to develop. In 1824, at a meeting of the Anonymous Association, a club of 30 to 40 Boston Unitarians, a proposal was presented to advance Unitarianism through an organization devoted to the publication of tracts. Discussion of the proposal was carried on for several months. In May of 1825, at the next meeting of the Berry Street Conference, it was unanimously decided to organize the American Unitarian Association. The committee drafted a constitution, and on May 26, 1825, the AUA was born. This was still far from a denominational structure in the modern sense of the word. The AUA was comprised not of churches, but of individual members. The stated purpose was not to serve congregations or even coordinate their activities, but to spread the word through print. It was poorly funded and received only lukewarm support in many quarters.
Believe it or not, that was one of the most interesting readings I could find. As I mentioned last week, I used to take high school students on heritage trips to Boston. I was on staff at a very wealthy and large Unitarian Universalist church, and the youth fundraised all year, but the church was still had to take like $10,000 to $20,000 in their budget just to reserve for these youth to go to Boston. And today I want to bring you to these youth that were visiting the Arlington Street Church. This church is interesting for a few reasons. First of all, it's an old Unitarian church right on the edge of the Boston Common. Actually, who's ever been to that church? Oh. Look at this congregation. Online people, like 8 people raised their hand, which is way beyond what I would have expected. Anyway, so it's an old Unitarian church right on the edge of the Boston Common. There's a T-stop right next to it. It's a beautiful old building filled with Tiffany stained glass. In the 80s and 90s, it was central in the ministry of and to lesbian and gays in the wake of the AIDS crisis. it still has a very strong identity as part of the LGBT movement. But this church goes back much farther than that. For some reason, this church always takes the name of the street that it's on. So right now it's on Arlington Street, hence the name, the Arlington Street Church. Before that, it was on Federal Street. I'll leave it to you to figure out what the name of the church was then. This particular church was founded in 1727, originally as a Presbyterian church. In 1786, it became Congregationalist. It was also the church where Massachusetts met to ratify the Constitution. The pulpit that you can preach from is very, very high up. It is not accessible to anybody with any kind of mobility needs. Rumor is that that is William Ellery Channing's pulpit. For those who don't know, Channing was a Unitarian minister back in the early 1800s. He was white because just about all, but never all, of the faith was white. He is what many have called the father of American Unitarianism, and he's the reason we are having this service today, but I will get to that in a second. If you had the great fortune, or in my very anxious case, misfortune, of ever preaching from that pulpit with the front doors open, you see a giant statue of William Ellery Channing staring at you. No one in the congregation sees it, but his statue is like right on the Boston Common facing the pulpit, basically. Anyway, we had a hard time. We had brought these 15 ninth graders to the Arlington Street Church to learn some of the history. The highlight of the tour, probably to the chagrin of anyone trying to sleep in the neighborhood, was a trip to the bell tower where the youth were given the entire hymnal in bell notation. Is that what it's called, Lee? This is what we're actually trying to get you to have the experience of. I had a minister who said, they're not asleep, but if you can't fall asleep in church, then where can you fall asleep? Anyway. Lee, I'm picking on you. Oh, this is a whole ignoring thing. Okay. Anyway, so they had hymn books that just had the bell notes on them. And any youth was able to play any hymn they wanted up from the bell tower. As I was wont to do, I spent most of the whole trip, explaining to the youth how deep and long and old this religion is. I would tell them about the Council of Nicaea back in 325, when those who we would later call Unitarian lost the vote on whether or not Jesus was human or God. I would tell them about during the Protestant Reformation, when the king in what is now Romania became a Unitarian and made the entire country a religiously tolerant country at a time where most countries were not. And I would tell them about how the churches that they see on this tour, many of whom trace their roots back to the early 1700s, are now Unitarian Universalist churches. When the area we now call Massachusetts was colonized, these Calvinistic people would set up a church in every city. This church is where they would do their civic duties. And unlike the Catholics or the Anglican churches, where bishops and cardinals and popes and kings picked the theology and the clergy, in these congregational churches, the people picked the theology and the minister and voted on the budget. So most of what I tell these teenagers, especially as they are immersed in schools, which is completely unlike anything here, where people say you're part of a new religion or a cult or a new agey thing or a thing they've never heard of, I tell them that they should rest assured that they are a part of a religion that has existed for many, many years, probably going all the way back to Jesus. So imagine my frustration when the tour guide at the Arlington Street Church, the man who would show us the bell tower, in his discussion with these youth, he said that our religion is at the oldest what would now be 200 years old. And if you're being even more specific, it's only what would now be 64 years old. You see, because 64 years ago, in 1961, the Unitarians and the Universalists voted to merge. Wait, is it 64?
Yeah,
Okay. 61. No.
The merger was 61.
No, 64 years.
Oh, I don't know the math.
I don't know the math. Where's our math major? Well, sure, we'll say 64. Good. So before that, there was no Unitarian Universalism. There was Unitarianism and Universalism, so you could easily say this religion didn't exist until 1961. But the older number that he said, that this week will turn 200, is because that is when William Ellery Channing founded the American Unitarian Association. Yes, next week marks 200 years of people who identify as Unitarian associating with each other. According to this tour guide, that was the start of the religion. And in recognition of that marker, today we will honor the 200th anniversary of the American Unitarian Association. We will do so by singing hymns I've always known as Forward Through the Ages, but those of you who converted to this church may know it as Onward Christian Soldiers. I would like for you to experience that dissonance that comes from hearing this tune but singing a different set of words. Keep that tension and that dissonance with you throughout the service, because there is always a tension between who we say we are and who we want to be and the broader, more complicated realities of the tune that comes out of this world. So today, we sing as we celebrate the ongoing movement of this faith. I invite you to rise if your body lets you.
Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine, gifts in differing measures, hearts of one accord, manifold the service, one the sure reward. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine. Wider grows the vision, realm of love and light. For if we must labor till our faith is sight, prophets have proclaimed it, martyrs testified, poets sung its glory, heroes for it died. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine. Not alone we conquer, not alone we fall. In each loss or triumph, lose or triumph all. Bound by God's far purpose in one living whole, move we on together to the shining goal. Onward through the ages with unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine.
On the 26th day of May, 1825, at 10 in the morning, a little company of ministers and laymen met in the Old Berry Street vestry, voted to organize, adopted a constitution, choose officers, and to resolve that the new society shall be known by the name of the American Unitarian Association. The hardness of religious intolerance has perceptibly softened. Dogmas, once universal, accepted, rest lightly upon the men's minds and hearts. Within our own borders, our churches have doubled, and our gifts to missionary objects increased tenfold. Unitarianism, whose name had then hardly crossed the Hudson, has established a line of churches from sea to sea.
So that was the meeting minutes of the Board of Directors of the American Unitarian Association 50 years after the signing of their charter. So there's actually more to it, and I thought I cut it in half because I thought it was really good that you hear what they were talking about in 1876 as it relates to the offering. So let me start with the offering and say this whole month we are sharing the offering with Louisiana Trans Advocates. So that means whatever you give, half will go to the church, half will go to Louisiana Trans Advocates throughout the entire month of May. So here is the rest of that reading. We come now to the work of the year and its results. The collections for general use amount to $33,000 in place of $37,000 raised last year. See if this feels right to anyone who is a part of the budget conversation. Oh no, this is going to take a little while. Y'all could sit. This is going to be a boring, long read of 1800s comments on funding. But I just want you to picture how you're going to feel. See if this sounds like pledge time when the pledges don't come in. Anyway, general use to the amount of $33,000 in place of $37,000 raised last year. When we consider that these collections have been made in the face of commercial paralysis, when all kinds of business have been at a standstill, and when the most prosperous have as often reaped loss as profit, this result is not a discouraging one. And if we reflect that 10 years ago, in similar times, to the receipt of the association sank to $23,000, we shall recognize that the sense of responsibility for Christian work has deepened in our churches, and the habit of regular giving has been confirmed. Nevertheless, we have to state that to meet the expenses of the new year, we have had to draw from our general fund $17,000. I just wanted you to hear to know that for as long as there have been people trying to raise money, there have been people not raising enough money, and then board minutes about them. With that, now I will ask you to give very generously, as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received. Y'all are good sports to go on this very boards minute journey. Before we go deeper into the implications of this anniversary, I want to tell you about the next reading that is coming up. A colleague of mine did her best to make the founding of the American Unitarian Association interesting. She wrote a little play that was intended to be done in worship. She took a lot of the text from those minutes of that event and had different characters who were actually there act them out. As much as I wanted to share that with you, it was just too dry. So rest assured, there will not be a play today about the founding of the American Unitarian Association. However, in her attempt to make it interesting, the next reading after the sermon part will have kind of her director's notes. So it'll have the description of the setting, a list of the characters, and I Googled every character to find a picture of them. I found 3 of them, but there was like 6. So you're going to see the 3 of them, but you're not going to see the rest of them, and you're just going to basically kind of hear everything she said other than any actor. Does that make sense? It's going to stand out as kind of weird, but no weirder than me reading minutes about budget. So, all right. So the question we have today is, what does all of this have to do with us? What does it matter that a sickly old preacher from 200 years ago, what does it matter what he said and did? The world is burning right now. There is chaos everywhere. Right now, we have a legislature actually debating whether or not restaurants have to warn you about the use of seed oils. For those who don't know, that's canola oil or vegetable oil. But they're not doing it because of a deep concern for cancer or pollutant exposure to the citizens of Louisiana. They're doing it because those high up in our government right now have bought into some weird internet conspiracy theories, and they're working their way into policy in this state. But I digress. For you to know where you are within Unitarian Universalism, we have to know where we came from. And we came from white New England. As early as the 1700s, there were always black practitioners of both Unitarianism and Universalism, although they found the path to connection with any formal institution at best out of reach. Because in the 17 and 1800s, Unitarianism held such a strong hold on the politics, our faith was dramatically, intrinsically intertwined with Massachusetts history and government, which is dramatically intertwined with American history and government. So a lot of the things that we are seeing today have their origins in one way or another deep within this religion. So to describe where things were and where they are now on either side of the founding of the American Unitarian Association, we got to come back to Boston way on that day. As I mentioned, there were these churches all over the place who were deciding their own theology. There were these natural fights within churches between the Orthodox and the liberals. And as was mentioned in that first reading by my history professor, theologically liberal, which was the identity of many of these ministers, meant moving away from Calvinism and Christ and moving towards a more expansive understanding of God and religion. But they still fell very squarely into the conservative political realm. Many of the old Unitarians looked down on overly emotional preaching as a sign of poor and ignorant people. They looked down on the Universalists, who were more moved by their heart than by their education. While in theory Unitarians denounced slavery, in practice they benefited quite a bit from the institution. Look no further than Thomas Jefferson, who could not be a Unitarian because those churches weren't called Unitarian churches when he was president, but attended churches that would later be and ascribed what we would now identify as a Unitarian theology. In fact, this faith so strongly identified with Thomas Jefferson that for the longest time, a district in our association was named after him, as were a few churches. But that strange juxtaposition of his ability to pen the words that all men are created equal, with the reality of where he lived and who was forced to work and live on his land, point out something different. That's the dissonance I'm trying to name about the hymn that we're trying to sing with different lyrics to a tune that doesn't necessarily match. Does that make sense? So what happened over time is there were tensions within these churches and within the larger accumulation of Congregationalist churches about being more orthodox or more liberal theologically. In 1819, William Ellery Channing preached a sermon in Baltimore, that's also where this year's General Assembly is, where he named that he was a Unitarian Christian. 6 years later, he gathered a group of big shots in Massachusetts to found the American Unitarian Association. Before that time, the only people who were Unitarian, by the way, I'm going to talk about fire and I'm going to talk about the Boston Celtics at some point later, just to give you an excuse to not fall asleep yet. Before that time, the only people who were called Unitarian, they were only described that way as a pejorative. After that, individuals could freely associate themselves under this new religious heading. They created a publishing house to distribute sermons and theological information across the country. The descendant of that institution is our own Beacon Press and Skinner House Press. They produce many of the Unitarian Universalist books that are out there, but they also host other important social and religious texts. This is the publishing house that printed the Pentagon Papers back when that whole thing was happening. It's the publishing house that holds the right to all of Dr. King's works. In the 1830s, the American Unitarian Association sent someone down to New Orleans to see about starting up a Unitarian church here. When they found out that the Church of the Stranger in New Orleans, which was a group of people kicked out of the Presbyterian Church following a very complicated minister who was preaching universalism, they agreed that that was good enough and they would just list it as a Unitarian church. And so in the 1830s, in New Orleans, you had a Unitarian church preaching universalism some 128 years before the merger. This church here was started by a group of professors at LSU in the 1940s. They called themselves the Channing Club, presumably after William Ellery Channing. In the early days, when they were looking for support and preaching, the now minister emeritus of the New Orleans church, the late Albert DeLando, he would drive up to support this church. The fight for reproductive justice, the first Unitarian church in Dallas, they were a part of picking the person who would be Roe. In fact, when I was in seminary, a member of my student the committee that helped me be okay in seminary, she was in the room when they interviewed and selected Roe. The first legally recognized gay marriage in this country happened at the Unitarian Universalist Association's headquarters in what used to be 25 Beacon Street. The respite this church offers you amidst a very regressive and complicated city and state, all of that got here because generation after generation followed the lead of this group of imperfect, complicated people who gathered together to create what is now our Unitarian Universalist Association. Let's sing this next hymn.
When the waters are deep, friends carry me over. When I cry in my sleep, love calls me home. Time ferry me down the river, friends carry me safely over. Life tend me on my journey, love call me home. When the waters are cold, friends carry me over. When I'm losing my hold, love calls me home. Time ferry me down the river, friends carry me safely over. Life tend me on my journey, love call me home. When I cannot swim, friends carry me over. Well, open your arms, take me home. Love call me home. Time ferry me down the river, friends carry me safely over. Life tend me on my journey, love calls me home. Take the gift that I bring. Friends, carry me over. Deep within me I sing. Love calls me home. Time, ferry me down the river. Friends, carry me safely over. Life, tend me on my journey. Love calls me home. Life offers a chance. Friends, carry me over. Time cannot stop it. Love, call me home. Time, ferry me down the river. Friends, carry me safely over. Life, tend me on my journey. Love, call me home.
The setting. 44 white men gathered in a rather chilly room in Boston on January 27, 1825. They have been charged to discuss the practicality and expediency of forming a Unitarian convention or association to consist of clergymen and laymen, to meet annually or oftener. The vibes resemble the average congregational annual meeting. Some of the men have not yet had lunch. Many wonder how long this whole thing will take. The parliamentarian, reader of resolutions, speaks in a stentorian voice, has good posture. Andrews Norton. Okay. Harvard professor of sacred literature. Mike, put it up. Oh. There we go. Andrews Norton, Harvard professor of sacred literature, known to friends and enemies alike as the Unitarian Pope, means business. William Ellery Channing, the father of American Unitarianism, the one guy in the room everyone wants to impress. Henry Ware, the younger, not the elder. These guys tend to recycle names like the royal families in Game of Thrones. Young, organized, possessed of many ideas. Judge Jackson, an esteemed member of the Massachusetts Supreme Court, which is kind of a big deal. Reverend Dr. Pierce of Brookline, a gentleman who is having a bit of trouble containing himself. Mr. George Bond, a Boston merchant of some renown, has skipped breakfast. As if these events were not thrilling enough, the really interesting part came sometime after the minutes were concluded. Are you ready for the twist in the ending? The committee spent so much time planning for it, it never met. Those 9 appointed gentlemen never came together. After all that, nothing happened. The subject was deemed too hot to handle, the general discord too great to be efficiently resolved. And yet 4 months later, on May 25th, 1825, an energetic group of younger ministers, led by James Walker, Henry Ware Jr., Ezra Stiles Gannett, all of whom had been present for that historic debate, went rogue. They arrived at the Berry Street Conference in Boston and personally presented their own plan for a new convention of Unitarian clergy, met with affirmation from certain members of that body on the very next day, May 26, 1825. They chartered the American Unitarian Association. That's how it started.
And let me also say, I threw those 3 images at poor Mike like right before the service started, and I said, put them in here, and you'll know when. And so that's why it took a second for us to get it there. I've always been intrigued by the juxtaposition of modern and past. I particularly like it when the two collide in interesting and strange ways. Last summer, I was in Boston because if we were going to have an all-virtual General Assembly, I was going to go somewhere where there were Unitarians. I planned to spend some time Friday visiting the Arlington Street Church. I tried to walk over there, but they were having a parade. You see, a few days after I got to Boston, the Boston Celtics won the NBA championship. They slated that ill-fated Friday, ill-fated for me, as parade day. I watched them set up the parade from my hotel window, which was right next to King's Chapel. This is the oldest Unitarian church in the country. It was built to be the chapel for the King of England whenever he came over. It was Anglican. But back in the 1600s, some members of that church rewrote the Book of Common Prayer to get rid of the Trinity. To this day, they still do worship. They still offer communion. They still have pew boxes, which were boxes that you would actually pay to be in. And the more you gave to the church, the better the box was. And inside each of those pew boxes is a rewritten Book of Common Prayer, a Bible, and our hymnal. Even though I was staying next to King's Chapel, I couldn't get to King's Chapel because in preparation for this parade, they lined the entire streets with barricades. Not just like the important intersections, the entire parade route, and they linked them all together. In fact, on my 20-minute walk from the oldest Unitarian church in the country, to the Arlington Street Church for my visit, I couldn't cross the street because all of it was barricaded. When I was about 2/3 of the way through the Boston Common, the parade finally came upon us. When I tell you that my kids were disappointed by this parade, that would be a dramatic understatement. The entire parade was a series of duck boat trucks, like those vans that go in the water, and each one had one, I guess, member of the team on it with their family and friends. Other than inaudibly distorted music that they were blaring from a speaker, there was no music, there were no bands. The only throw was confetti and little, we won the championship things. I figured out later why they had the barricades. These fans were drunk. Like St. Patrick's Day drunk here, but worse. I have never seen, I've done Mardi Gras. I've never seen this amount of inebriation. When I finally made it to the Arlington Street Church, the church that ostensibly housed the founding of our faith, I couldn't get in because they had to lock it because there were so many drunk Celtics fans draped all over the front steps. There were also draped all over the statue of Channing. I was locked out of my pilgrimage because modern times got in the way. The reason I shared the parts of Reverend MacDonald Ladd's play with you was because she spent a lot of time emphasizing the humanness and the imperfection of the founding of the faith. In fact, those who originally gathered to form their new religion didn't do it. It was only later when a different group of people came together a few months and founded it against the original wishes, or at least against the glory of the original conveners. And I'm drawn to the peculiarities of their conversations. You see, history is tricky because we know how it turned out. But everyone who did anything has no clue how it's going to turn out or be remembered. Just as none of us know how our conversations and our friendships will shape history. And I'm drawn to the juxtaposition of modern and historic, of drunken fans draped all over the front steps of the founding of the American Unitarian Association. Also, parenthetically, they mentioned a few times Berry Street. That was a lecture that used to meet on, who wants to guess what street? Berry. Yes, this is a smart congregation. That Berry Street still convenes every year, and they bring in thinkers from Unitarian Universalism. I think you can even watch it online, but these traditions are still playing out. And in a segue that I didn't see coming, at least until I wrote this on Friday, were the Facebook comments on the story about the fact that the Nottoway plantation burned down. While not entirely universal, the vast majority of the comments split into two categories. Category one were white people upset about the loss of either a relic of history or a venue or something beautiful. And the other category were black people celebrating. There were all of the kind of online cynicism and tropes that I'm used to. There was wordplay with the name. Like one of the jokes that I heard multiple times was not a way to get enough water to put that fire out. And over and over and over, I read black commenter after black commenter talking about revenge of the ancestors and needing more marshmallows to make their s'mores. When I first came to serve you, I talked to some of the church members about the ways in which plantation theology shows up to this day. One of them said that underneath the surface, everywhere in Louisiana, there is an anger and a resentment, and everyone here has learned how to walk cautiously over it. Because if you poke too hard at the ground, the anger and the resentment will shoot up. And I thought a lot about that plantation as I wrote this. I thought about how it might feel to be one of those communities around White Castle who still see the proliferation of giant toxic chemical plants surrounding them, who understand these chemical plants were placed on top of old plantations, who see a government forbidding the teaching of what happened to their grandparents and great-grandparents. I thought about the juxtaposition of a state legislature now so concerned with seed oils and fluoride, with a new awakened concern for people's health, with no inclination or desire to fix anything that actually can cause death to the people of this state. And what I read in those comments, which is just one of many examples of that ground being poked, and the thing that all of us knew deep down coming out, was the feeling that after hundreds of years of no justice, little help, even if the fire was an accident, I heard from those whose families were most directly impacted by this country's legacy of violence and use of people for the use of people's actual lives and bodies to amass wealth for a handful of people. I heard some sense in the celebration of the world righting itself. And then bring that in with these white Unitarian men's big emphasis on men, because the founding, because at that time, even though Unitarians and Universalists were some of the first to welcome women into the ministry, it was still very heavily men, and these are the people who founded the country. But bring in these white Unitarian men founding what will become our religious home. And if you remember that juxtaposition I asked you to pull earlier, when you hear the tune of Onward Christian Soldiers, sung with the words of Forward Through the Ages, that complexity is what we need here today in our celebration of this anniversary. Because these were the men who founded this country, which pushed white versus black and dashed the poor against the rocks to forever be fighting white versus black, all so that those at the top could continue to amass wealth. What all of this is calling for me to do is to stay open to what is being asked of us right now, to stay open to listening to the voices of those whose story has been and continues to be squashed out. In contrast to the founding of the American Unitarian Association, when those who made these decisions were at the epicenter of power, our faith and many of the practitioners of it currently find ourselves on the edges of that power. We have ceded our theological voice to those who say that God is angry and punishing and that you are evil. And our goal as a religious people right now is to stay grounded in this earth. It is to be crystal clear about where we came from, what we can do, and what we cannot change. It is to acknowledge the world as it is so that we can see the world we want going forward. It is to acknowledge how many of you and us are hurt by this current economic and political climate. It is to ask us to recommit ourselves, however imperfectly we do it, to trying over and over again to build beloved community. It's to trust the relationships that you are building with each other, even if it seems like the thing you're doing didn't work or failed. Trust that love and connection and commitment can bring us closer and closer to the world we need it to be. Amen. Let's sing.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quest for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limits and praise the sublime. Wake now my passion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience, with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by your care.
Let's keep, oh good. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. For all who seek a right path, may a way be found. And the courage to take it, step by step. Go in peace, go in love. Amen.